I always like to invite people to like give your alter ego, like that next version of you. If you were to think of somebody who has like improved their health to the best that you can envision for the next 12 months, what does that look
Mm-hmm.
like? Give that person a name, an alter ego
Uh-huh.
name. My alter
Mm-hmm.
ego name is Magic Mandy, right? And every morning sitting up and asking myself, like, okay, what does Magic Mandy do today? That shifts you into the perspective of being the version of you who has that health, and how does she navigate the daily experience, the 24 hours, right?
Welcome to the podcast Emotional Intelligence, your greatest asset and key to success. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Carlaccio, coming to you from the Greater New Haven, Connecticut area. As an emotional intelligence, or EQ coach, I'm committed to helping people develop both emotional intelligence and mental fitness. That is, you'll come to regard problems as situations that help you learn and grow. EQ is a way of being and doing in the world that enables you to develop and sustain a positive relationship with yourself and others, at home, at work, and everywhere in between. Please subscribe to this podcast and tap the like button so more people can enjoy the benefits of EQ. And now, here's the show.
Hello and welcome everybody to the podcast Emotional Intelligence, your greatest asset and key to success. Thank you so much for joining us. I have a fabulous guest here today. Her name is Amanda Hinman. Hi, Amanda. How are you?
Jamie, fantastic. Excited to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you're here. So I want to tell our guests something, but first I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. If you are new to this podcast, thank you for tuning in. And if you are returning, then thank you for coming back. And don't forget to like and subscribe and share this podcast with somebody, because Amanda has a great message. And first, I want to tell you a little bit about Amanda, and then we're going to get right into it. Okay? So, Amanda is a functional medicine health coach. She's also a best-selling author and the founder of the Hinman Holistic Health Institute. She specializes in helping successful women between the ages of 40 and 60 who are struggling with hormone, mood, and gut imbalances to heal naturally and gain back 3 hours of energy so they feel fantastic again. And that is something we definitely need to talk about, because I think everybody would love to get 3 hours back from their day. And what
Absolutely.
makes Amanda's story so powerful is that her path to this work began with a personal crisis. And oftentimes, I think crisis is what creates change. So probably a good thing that the crisis happened, because now you're able to do this amazing work with everybody. So when her 8-year-old daughter began experiencing these unexplained seizures and conventional medicine offered very few answers, Amanda dove into root cause healing. And along the way, she discovered her own hormone and thyroid imbalances and discovered just how connected our physical symptoms are to stress, trauma, and emotional suppression. And so today, Amanda combines functional medicine, emotional intelligence, and neuroscience to help women reclaim their health from the inside out. She's the creator of the Thyroid and Hormone Solution, a proven 5-step framework that has helped hundreds of women overcome Hashimoto's, hypothyroidism, anxiety, weight gain, fatigue, insulin resistance, and more without relying on restrictive diets and medication. That in itself is a miracle. And so Amanda's work has been featured in media outlets and on stages across the country. And her mission is to empower women to step back into their full vitality, physically, emotionally, and energetically. And I would say maybe even spiritually, because oftentimes everything is connected, including our spiritual well-being. And to trust that healing is not only possible, but sustainable. And so when she's not coaching or speaking, she enjoys spending time with her husband and 4 children and exploring holistic living and helping women transform their health stories into legacies of strength. So again, welcome.
Thank you, Jamie. Yes. Every time you share something, it really inspires me to think about the women's lives and the ripple effect. I can tell from my own journey, when we can step into a place of empowerment, or at least when I can step into a place of empowerment and change the trajectory of not only my health, my family's health, it completely radically changed our lives. So that's why, I have such a passion for helping others to feel good. It makes a
Yeah.
difference.
And, I think a lot of people, so I was at a retreat today, and one of the things we talked about was how much stress everybody is under. And, the stress is coming from politics, it's coming from economic insecurity, it's coming from a not so healthy lifestyle, oh, you're in a hurry, well, let's just go grab a burger, right? Let's just go get fast food, or let's skip dinner altogether, or I'm too busy, I'm going to sit and eat at my desk, and I'm not even going to take a lunch break, or I'm not going to go for a walk, or there's so many things. And then if people are stressed, they're not sleeping well, and if they're not sleeping well, like, sleep hygiene is the thing, that you help people with. So all of those things are connected. And if we're not feeling good, we're, kind of imbalanced for whatever reason, we're grumpy. And then, so we have, like you say, we have this ripple effect. So the ripple effect is for everything, right? If you're feeling crummy, that ripples out into how you interact with people and how you feel about yourself. And then likewise, if you're feeling good, how do you feel about yourself? And then how are you interacting and showing up in the world?
Definitely. And it's funny, I was actually just working with a client yesterday, and we were talking about the same dynamic because, we all have different angles. I think that we can create a shift around. For some of us, it's understanding the physiology. What's going on hormonally in my body? Like you mentioned something very interesting, Jamie, and it's so relevant about digestion and our gut
Yeah.
health. We know our gut health is so important, but yet so often I work with women who don't even realize when they're eating at their desk or skipping lunch or multitasking as they're kind of picking at food throughout, the afternoon, that experience from a physiological perspective is radically different to our gut. Like we don't have adequate digestive secretions to break down the food thoroughly. Chances are we're kind of just chomp, 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 swallow big, huge clunks. We're not really using our teeth and our saliva to liquefy the food in your mouth before swallowing, which is what it's intended to be. And all these things seem insignificant or kind of minor, here and there, but they have really big ramifications when they're just done over and over again, right? It affects even the immune system because it will then have these huge chunks of food that it can't break down and it's unrecognizable. So it kind of puts the immune system on hypervigilant alert, and that can lead to a cascade of autoimmune dynamics and all sorts of different things that seemingly are unrelated. Go back to exactly what you said, simple practices done repetitively, and I think the deeper, this is what I was talking about with my client, the deeper core is really getting to what are those underlying, maybe even unconscious beliefs that we have not enough time, it doesn't really matter anyway. What I call like why bother syndrome is something that's pretty chronic for the women I support, and there's no fault, but it's like, maybe you've tried to change your health and made a little bit of strides, but it didn't stick. So it's like, oh, why even bother? It's not going to be sustainable, right? Or you've worked with a functional practitioner and got a list of supplements, and after a while, it seemed like this is just me popping a bunch of pills, and I'm not noticing a big change. So why bother? Like, I'm not saying why bother as in, people are just throwing up their arms, but it's more of like, usually you've tried some things and it hasn't been able to be like finely tuned into a way that creates habit, where it just happens, where it doesn't require extra effort and energy, and your brain just kind of like you brush your teeth, right? Jamie, you get to brush your teeth every day, and it doesn't require a ton of energy and effort. It's automatic. That's what we get to create, is like, what can that look like in the nervous system to help you put in some routines that don't require a tremendous amount of effort, but that are in support of your unique body's balance. So I think it comes down to like finding some customization and some simple, repeatable strategies that will work for each individual.
Right. So you said a lot of stuff there, and I'm still back on gut health. Because I
Yeah.
know that, you see commercials on TV, or you see ads for women who feel bloated. And so they want to give you a suppository, or they want to sell you something to help you, you know, flow. But ultimately, that seems like a Band-Aid approach. And what I'm hearing is that there's a systems approach. And partly the way to get our system working again is to really look at the interlocking variables. And also, like you say, we have to develop different habits. And so
Yes.
things take time, but you can't sort of fix one thing and expect everything else to get fixed because everything is working. So you could start eating salads, but if you're not exercising and you're not drinking enough water and you're not sleeping and you're still feeling stressed, or, emotional intelligence comes into play here with resilience and, really handling life in a more equanimous way. All of those things play in. So you might be eating right, but if there's something wrong and you have insulin resistance, or if there's something wrong in say your personal life or your work life, then one thing might not be the quick fix. And there is no quick fix, but it sounds like you're saying it doesn't have to be super hard either.
You are spot on, Jamie. It doesn't have to be overly complex. In fact, I think sometimes complexity is a disadvantage. It can be overwhelming. I think one of the keys is having a systematic approach that can be customized to your specific body, the needs of your body and your life now, because what your body needed when you were in your 30s is going to be different than when you're in your 40s and
Trust
your
me,
50s.
I know.
Your body changes, right? Our life
Yes.
changes.
Yes.
Even thinking about our roles change, right? Our roles as a mom to elementary school kids is different. Your son's going off to prep. It's a different role that you're playing in his life right now, right, Jamie?
Yeah.
So yes, I think the key here is to having some type of a almost like a curriculum, right? So we think about like anytime we're growing in education, it's very easy to relate to like a curriculum. But when we think about maybe even a career or an entrepreneurial journey, sometimes you have like stages of, okay, I got to learn marketing and then I've got to learn sales. Like you kind of know the key steps. I think when we approach our health, it's similar. It's like, how can I know from a root cause perspective? How can I kind of peel back the layers and understand the signals that my body is telling me?
Yeah.
Where I'd like to share, and I'm happy to share with your listeners, my free hormone health assessment, because it has you kind of map your symptoms against the top 6 metabolic hormones to say like, oh, what is my body trying to tell me? What is my body trying to say without words, right? Through symptoms.
Yes.
So kind of looking and getting curious about the signals from your symptoms, then taking a look at nourishment. We all know food is important. So what nutrients specifically, right? Rather than having kind of a general broad sense of the paleo diet versus the keto diet versus all these different things. Well, if I look at my body, what specifically does my body need now in this season? So you can kind of be more streamlined. Then we look at the digestion and the capacity to be able to break down those nutrients so your cells get the full benefit of them. And then I do a whole comprehensive look at what I call reset your thinking, because just as you talked about, Jamie, that emotional intelligence piece really drives the nervous system.
Yes.
Whether it's going to be in that fight or flight or that parasympathetic rest and heal. So we look at what are the kind of underlying relationship with stress, right? Stress isn't necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. It's what's your relationship with the circumstances that are happening in your life.
I was at this retreat, and I went to a breathwork session. And, we were all literally talking about stress, and then how do you respond to stress if you're always in the fight, flight, fawn, freeze mode, and you're, releasing all of these hormones or cortisol, and your body's constantly like feeling like there's an onslaught of danger. Then you can be eating well, but the rest of the stuff is still imbalanced. And I like how you talked about how just listening to your body and getting curious And then I started thinking it's kind of like when the check engine light comes on in your car. It's like, you need to take it in. You're not exactly sure, but you know that there's a signal is that something's not right. And so if we listen to our bodies and we actually just pay closer attention, then maybe, you can start playing detective on some level, right? And kind of like you say, uncovering those root causes. So tell me how you help women with hormonal imbalance, because a lot of women, especially our age, especially in the 40 to 60 range and even older, all these hormonal changes are crazy making. And
Yes.
how do you help people with that, with the holistic approach?
Well, I'll give you a prime example. So I'm thinking of a woman, Darlene, and we were just talking today. So she started work with me about 2 months ago. And at the place when she first connected, she was really struggling with sleeping through the night. She would wake up really around, she's like between 2 and 3
Mm-hmm.
a.m. every night, and
Oh,
have her mind just kind of like go into the day, go into like all the thoughts of what was on her to-do list, what she needed to
mm-hmm.
remember, kind of that swirling,
Yes.
fast-paced, wired but tired type of sensation. So that was insomnia. She also had put on a couple of extra pounds in the last 12 months, like 5 pounds. And she's like, I just see my body feels less, you know, less light and toned. It was just that I can see these changes happening.
Yes.
And the overall anxiety levels have increased. And we know that there are correlations with the levels of estrogen, especially as compared to progesterone, that can affect the neurological emotional state. So like, for
Right.
example, when women
Oh,
have
yes.
changes, it makes a difference. So sometimes
Yeah.
we're blaming ourselves because we think like, what's wrong with me? Sometimes
Yeah.
it really is a physiological shift that's
Yes.
having a changing effect on the brain chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
So part of it was really empowering for her to get some more information and data. So we did some testing. We look at micronutrient testing. We looked at some hormone testing, and I like to use some of the functional labs where it actually looks at, like, for example, a micronutrient urine test can actually tell what nutrients are making it to your cell to have an effect. So you
Mm.
can find a metabolite that you then excrete through urine. That's a little bit different than testing blood, because blood will show what nutrients are circulating around the blood supply, which can be useful for sure. But sometimes things can be circulating in our blood, but not actually get inside the cell to have a chemical reaction, just like insulin resistance, right? The insulin can't get into the cell or bring glucose in. That's what insulin resistance means. Same thing can happen with other hormones or with other nutrients. So when we test with a functional, kind of looking at what's actually getting into our cells and having an effect, now there's some useful information to look at for her to, again, be a little bit more targeted. And this woman, Darlene, it was interesting because we were very clear of some key foods and nutrients for her to start to build into her plan to replenish her cells capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Jimmy, you talk about our ability to kind of come with agency, to come with a curious perspective or
Right.
inquiry instead of a reactive
Mm-hmm.
emotional. That
Right.
takes energy.
That makes it worse.
Yeah, well, and that takes energy. So our cells,
Yeah.
our body has to be able to create a unit of energy, or what's called ATP, in order for us to even have the wherewithal to have curiosity in
Mm-hmm.
certain situations, right? So she knew what she needed to nourish herself with. And then we kind of had a simple recipe plan for her to start to build those in and practice that habit. And she found that after 2 weeks, she was really struggling, because she's like, I just don't feel good about this. And she kind of went back to her old way of eating, which was not adequately nourishing. That she was definitely undernourished,
Mm-hmm.
but that felt safer for her. And so we had a conversation. It was really interesting for her to tie back the deeper. And I'm like, well, tell me more what was going on. And she's like, actually, I had been sleeping and I had a really bad kink in my neck, and because I wasn't sleeping well. And then I started Googling, what if it's a brain tumor? Like, again, the
Oh,
anxiety kicking
yeah.
in, because
Hey,
her
yeah.
estrogen and progesterone levels were really skewed. So she's struggling through anxiety. And she's like, what I realized is, and I'm like, well, your nervous system didn't have the capacity at that time for you to start to make changes to your foods, because it was having this physical pain kind of the mental, emotional anxiety, wandering
Mhm.
thoughts of like, what if it's a brain tumor? What if it's something more serious?
Yeah.
So like we get to start before we even really dive in on making these nutritional changes and giving you a full meal plan to follow, which is what a lot of people do when they think of, oh, I want to change my health. Give me the
Right.
meal plan and I'll go do it.
Yes. Right.
Your ability to execute on that successfully depends on the state of your nervous system and your
Right.
capacity to handle kind of those little bumps and curveballs in life.
Right.
Once you get the curveball of stiff neck and sort of Googling, she didn't have the capacity to kind of stick with this meal plan.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And, I hear you talking a lot about anxiety, and it's very easy when you don't have enough knowledge, and not every, right. I mean, you study this. It's not like we're all born knowing our neurobiology and knowing, our intestinal system and knowing everything. So, a lot of people understand the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and people understand rest and digest, maybe, the different ways in which our nervous system is like on a teeter totter, right? I got to be careful. There's some danger here. And oh, I can be calm. It's okay. But all of that plays into the food, the sleep, the emotional intelligence. How are we thinking about and responding to things? If everything's a knee jerk reaction and if I'm not getting the results I want, what's wrong? And a lot of times, and this is sort of a thing for a lot of people, not just women, but we automatically go with what's wrong with me. I must have been doing something wrong, or I'm going crazy. Well, we might not be going crazy, but there are things that are going on that are crazy making.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. So it's helpful to kind of have that's why I say, let's look at the data, right? The
Hmm.
data is these experiences are happening physiologically in the body. We know these hormone levels are in a different shifted place. So what can we offer the body and support, and then also build in some so for her, before we really focused on the food changes, it was like, let's get these progesterone levels in a more
Yes.
balanced place to bring the anxiety down. And
Hmm.
let's also make sure the first system we're going to build in is to support the nervous system, right? So
Right.
for her, it was to support what are we doing in terms of taking breathing breaks a couple times a day? How
Yeah.
can we be listening to, even just like from a reinforcing positive beliefs and possibility, listening to, she found it, like we found together an audiobook that's a spiritually oriented audiobook, one of Wayne Dyer's. I love his
Oh,
like
I
work.
do
It's
too.
change your
Yes.
thoughts, change your mind. So
Hmm.
it's like, have that be the narrative that's playing in the background when you're washing the dishes or when you're,
Uh-huh.
doing some errands or in the car. Like, these are conscious choices that sound simple, but yet they really go a long way to reinforce this holistic picture of what's going to set you up for sustainable, healthy habits.
Yeah. And so it's a choice. It is a choice. I was just having a conversation with someone who's very uncomfortable and wants to change everything, but she's in a reactionary mode. So she doesn't like her hair, she doesn't like her job, she doesn't like her car, she doesn't like her apartment. Those are all external things. And I tried to remind her that there's something going on internally that you need to look at. And changing your hair or getting a different car or getting a different job, those things are external to what's really happening. And so it is about really kind of looking deeply within. And I had mentioned earlier the spiritual component, because for me, that is a core part of who I am. And it's how I start and end my day. And I love that you brought up Wayne Dyer. He's one of my favorites. But just the idea of, at night, what are you doing before you go to bed at night, right? What are you going to bed with? Are you going to bed with a good book? Or are you going to bed with, doom scrolling or,
Yes.
TikTok videos or something, so what do you, so there's putting things into our mind, putting things into our body, and then it's
Mhm.
like input output, right? So whatever we put in, it's going to come back out, and it's going to come out as stress and anxiety and insomnia and poor gut health, or stress related weight, right? A lot of women, when
Yes.
they are stressed, the stress goes into our stomachs. And so we gain weight in our stomachs. It's like, but wait a minute, I don't even eat pasta. Why am I getting all this weight
Right.
around my midsection?
And unfortunately, then sometimes what happens is, especially over age 40, women will calorie restrict and cut back on foods or calories. And that's when it's the easiest to lose lean muscle tissue, which is the most metabolically healthy. So instead of, especially if you're in that place of, stress and overwhelm and fight or flight state, when the body's going to hold on to what's coming in, because it's perceiving that there is a threat and a danger, and I don't know when my resources are going to run out. So I need to hold on to everything that I have from a caloric perspective. So it will hold on to that fatty adipose tissue because that's the most calorically dense, but it will sacrifice your lean muscle mass tissue, which is the exact opposite of what we want to have happen from a metabolic health longevity standpoint.
Right.
So I often tell women it's actually important for you to eat more in order to release the weight you're seeking, because metabolically we need to retain that lean tissue on the body. And again, but this is where like education and knowledge coupled with some specificity of what's happening in your body now and some inspiration can really go a long way to help women make that different choice, right? We do talk about it is choice. Sometimes we need a little bit more context and reminders to make the choices that are advantageous for our goals.
Yeah. And, sometimes, we live in kind of what I call a quick fix society. So we want to see things change right away, but it didn't get this way overnight. And so it isn't necessarily going to change overnight, but if you can just kind of keep with it. And then I would say, and I'm sure you say this too, if you are on a different kind of meal regimen and you're on a little bit of an exercise regimen and you are taking care of all of the other parts of your system with whatever, meditation and exercise, and you've got the hormones in check, and you go off your diet or you do something, that's okay, right? Because you're still building the habits. And so, because I can hear the why bother coming out, like, well, it's not changed fast enough. I'm still not sleeping right. And, your client who kind of went back to the things she knew, it's like you go to the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. So there's a little bit of trust that has to happen, maybe.
Absolutely. And that's why in that kind of that fourth step, we really integrate into what I call a new identity. It's like, you would identify as somebody who's a mom, and you will always identify as a mom, right? It's not like that will ever change or be gone from how you see yourself. Well, when we think about making a health change, my goal, my objective for my clients is always to have that be a permanent change. It's not like, oh, I felt better for 6 months and then things went back to where they were before. It's like, no, if we want to change, it's identifying as a woman who is now consistently conscious of our food, not perfect, but intentional with how I eat. I live my life in a way that set myself up for the routine and for the habits and for the lifestyle that's going to be building health instead of tearing it down. Right. So that's where we get really clear of like, okay, I always like to invite people to like give your alter ego, like that next version of you. If you were to think of somebody who has like improved their health to the best that you can envision for the next 12 months, what does that look like? Give that person a name, an alter ego name. My alter ego name is Magic Mandy, right? And every morning sitting up and asking myself like, okay, what does Magic Mandy do today that shifts you into the perspective of being the version of you who has that health, and how does she navigate the daily experience, the 24 hours, right? It's a very different place than just seeing it as a to-do list of things to do that I'm supposed to do or should do to support my health. But it's not about doing, it's about who am I being.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love what you just said. So in terms of positive intelligence and emotional intelligence, one of the sage powers that Shirzad Chamine talks about in positive intelligence is, well, there's the empathy power, there's the explore power, there's the innovate, and then there's, the navigate and the activate. So when we're in the navigate power, the sage power of navigation, you look at your older self, your older, wiser self, or the self that's 20 years down the road. And when you're looking at where do I go from here? What kind of decision will be in my highest good and for the highest good of those around me? You ask that older self. And if you can sort of envision who that person is, and most of us can, if we just take a moment and really reflect, what would that older self say right now to me with regard to a career shift, or with regard to an empty nest syndrome, or with regard to whatever, my body and my diet and the way that I'm, living or not living up to my full potential? What would she tell me right now, or what would he tell me?
Yes, yes, very similar. It's who am I being, and am I taking that, like you said, that 20-year
Future
experience and
self.
perspective, future
Yeah.
self, to really step through that lens. It's so
Yeah.
important, and it's a game changer. Honestly, that's when things, like I said, we go back to the root of health transformation. That's when you're really changing things at a systemic level
Yeah.
for a new normal for decades to come.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love it. So we didn't talk about the crisis that precipitated all this. Would you like to tell us just a little bit about what exactly happened that even got you on this path? Because that obviously was a huge game changer for your entire life and your family, right?
Yeah, and actually, it's funny that I love that this is kind of coming as a follow-up to what we were just talking about, Jamie, because I, in my, mid to late 20s, always identified as somebody who was very healthy. I was a group fitness instructor. I taught cardio kick spot classes. I had 13% body fat. I ate salads and smoothies. So, like, I'm going to be candid and just be cavalier here, but I thought I was kind of invincible when it came to health. Like, I've got this buttoned up and dialed in. I know what healthy
Yeah.
is, right? And kind of funny, of course, that's when life's going to slap you upside the head.
Yeah.
But then I was pregnant with my fourth daughter and discovered I had an autoimmune condition called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And I was kind of just burning through life. I mean, admittedly, I was, not sleeping well after having three little kids. I was definitely kind of go, 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 always that one, like jetting to the next thing or the next activity, trying to balance, work and kids and all of the things. Also was happening in my extended family, or my family of origin at that time, was some really overwhelming situations with a sibling who was going through alcohol addiction and a divorce. And so I was very intimately involved because I was very close with his now ex-wife at the time. We did a whole intervention. So I can see now, at the time, I didn't recognize how this had any effect on my health, but I can see
Right.
now the stress was a huge factor in precipitating the autoimmune dynamic. But I remember being at the doctor and being told, oh yeah, you'll just have to take this medication for the rest of your life.
Oh,
And, once you have one autoimmune condition, you're at a much greater risk for multiple conditions over the coming decades. And I was like, what? Wait a second. This can't be the case. Again, still no correlation to the stressors in my life, to the pace of the lifestyle that I was choosing, and to my body actually being completely depleted. It wasn't giving enough nourishment to handle the demand that I was being placed on it. And then a few months after, my oldest daughter, who was 8 at that time, had always been highly sensitive. She was a very sharp, witty girl, but she started to develop really severe anxiety to the point of 10 to 15 seizures in a day. And Jamie, nothing brings you to your knees more as a parent to see your child in life-threatening situations multiple times
absolutely.
a day.
Right.
I mean, I remember waking up multiple days, like, talk about cortisol and adrenaline. I was literally shaking with fear, because usually within the first 15 minutes, when her cortisol levels would spike because it was a hormone surge, she would start to seize. And so it was such a scary time. And that we were working with amazing pediatric neurologists and specialists down at Lurie Children's Hospital, and they ran all the tests, and they were saying, sometimes these things are hereditary, just like I was told with my autoimmune condition. There's no tumor, there's no discernible like source of the seizures,
Uh-huh.
we can manage this with medication. She was on 4 different benzodiazepines, taking
Ooh,
12 pills a
that's
day
a
as an 8-year-old.
lot of
A
medicine.
lot, to
Yeah.
the point where she was like not my child, like very, very,
Yeah.
mentally like kind of comatose and like,
Yeah.
and I knew, and we were told she would never be able to drive a car. And this was just to make it through a 24-hour period. And every fiber of my being is like, there has to be another path forward. Like, this cannot be her future. That's when I went back to school to study functional medicine science and spent a couple of years really understanding the interconnected factors of the digestive system and the endocrine system and the immune system and the cardiovascular, all the systems in the body, physiology, how they work together, and
Right.
what are those upstream root cause drivers and mechanisms that create the symptoms that are displayed. So her seizures were just the symptoms of
Right.
imbalance in her body, right? Just like my autoimmune, the thyroid being attacking itself with those autoimmune antibodies, that was just the symptom of imbalance and dysfunction in the body, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that led me on, again, inspiration, new knowledge that was like empowering of like, oh, wow, now I can make different choices because I understand the ramifications of some of the lifestyle factors and
Right.
responses to what was happening in them, right? The cool thing is, in under 9 months, she completely healed. I mean, we literally changed from a lifestyle perspective, from a stress management and kind of, how she was interpreting and understanding things in her life. And then also nutrition, like kind of looked at all the buckets that I do with clients now, right? The whole like kind of comprehensive approach to healing. She weaned off of all of her medication, has been seizure free ever since. Now she's just completed her sophomore year on a full ride scholarship at the University of Notre Dame. So she's thriving in life
Yes.
and very well. She's very emotionally empowered, right? She has
Yeah.
a skill set to understand, to listen to her body signals, to really tune in and recognize and give her body and her life what she needs to thrive, right?
Yeah.
So same approach that allowed me to put my autoimmune condition into remission and really navigate a path that allowed, of course, there's always bumps and, challenges that come up, but now we have the skills and the tools and the choice to navigate through those and maintain health,
Right.
maintain really good high peak performance. So that was, I kind of feel like it was a divine redirection, got her to show me like, yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
not just the food, it's not just the
Yeah.
exercise, there's more to the
Mm-hmm.
story to live with truly vibrant health.
Right.
And now
And
that's
I
what I help
think the
women to do.
key thing is empowerment.
Yes.
It's really about empowerment. And I have to say, I don't want to, we don't necessarily need to jettison Western medicine and Western, pharmacological approaches, because medicines have their place. But when somebody's on that much medication at 8 years old, it is time to take a look at what's going on and say you're medicating something without actually looking at the root cause. And so by getting to those root causes, not only did you get off the meds, but like you say, you empowered your daughter, and your daughter feels self-determined. And
Great.
you are able to make different choices. And I just love that. And I think it's a really, it's a message of hope. And so before we close, let's just bring in emotional intelligence, because I know that's part of your whole system. So we've
Yes.
got the gut health going, we've got the hormones, we've got the endocrine system going. And so how can we also shift into a place of, having all, really relying on our sage powers again? We want to be empathetic to ourselves and others. And when something happens, we have to get curious,
Mhm.
right? What's going on here? And maybe I need to read the tea leaves a little bit and then innovate, right? So this is a time for
Mhm.
thinking outside the box. And the box
Yeah,
often is Western medicine. And so outside the box is, let's look at these bigger things going on.
absolutely. And I think it's about taking a proactive approach,
Yeah.
because that's exactly what they teach in positive intelligence, right? Is to
Yes.
do the reps, to do the
Yeah.
PQ reps
Uh-huh.
proactively, because that's what gives you bandwidth. That's what
Yeah.
gives you the capacity to respond with curiosity or empathy.
Mhm.
If we don't
Right.
take that proactive approach, it's really difficult. Like I said, when your tank is on running on empty, it's really hard to then expect that extra capacity to think in a different way, right? That's when the body kind of
Right.
just goes neurologically, it goes into old patterns and old habits. So I mean,
Yeah.
I personally have gone through the positive intelligence program because that approach is so effective to proactively give you a context of understanding, an
Mhm.
inspirational pathway to follow a curriculum, and then that proactive practice that will give you increased capacity in all
Yeah.
areas of life.
Yeah. And so we're basically training our bodies to be different in the world, right? You talked
Mhm.
about who do you want to be? What is this self? Who do you want to be? How do you want to show up in the world? And for me, that's the question we need to be asking ourselves is how do you want to
Absolutely.
show up in the world? Who is that best self? And guess what? You're in charge,
Yes,
right? You're in charge. Yeah.
absolutely.
Oh, it has been a pleasure getting to know you and knowing a little bit more about how you help women. And all of Amanda's information will be in the show notes if you wanted to reach out and find out how you can get a new roadmap to life. And as always, I'm available for emotional intelligence coaching and whatever else you might need. And so thank you everyone for tuning in. And again, like and subscribe to this podcast. And Amanda and I will see you at the EQ or the PQ gym.
Yes, I love it.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.